A few years ago, when our primary activity during lockdown was to sit on the porch and watch the wildlife, I noticed a mother bird building a nest. I had never seen the process up close like this. I was so fascinated, I took note of everything she was doing. In fact, I became so engrossed in Mama Bird's family that I would sit on my chair each and every day just so I could observe the entire scenario up close and personal. She gathered bits of grass, twigs, leaves, and other odds and ends and wove them into a nest, tucked into an opening in the side of the house where a little niche provided both shelter and protection from predators. Soon the nest was entirely hidden, but still she flew back and forth until finally I did not see her for a while. But one day, as I was eating my breakfast on the porch, lo and behold, I heard chirping. I looked around to try and see inside the niche. I couldn't see the nest itself, but I could see about 5 or 6 open mouths stretching outwards from tiny little necks, reaching for the bits of food Mama Bird would bring into the nest. Again, she was on a mission. Off she flew to find food. Within a moment, she was back, depositing the food inside the open, eager beaks. I had never seen a bird's beak open that wide. It appeared as though they were merely attached at the base, stretching so widely open that their mouths appeared far bigger than their bodies. They were in fact tiny bare bodies with giant open beaks. But this did not last forever. One day it was time for the birds to fly the nest. This was fascinating because it appeared at first that they did not want to do it. Would you? Here they were in a birdie heaven, getting fed each day in that warm, cozy nest. It looked scary out there. They were still young and little. It was a dangerous world, unfamiliar and full of predators. They were inexperienced. They had no idea how to gather food for themselves, dig for a worm, or most importantly, they did not know how to fly. And it was a long way down. They had never used their wings. They were formed, but they were still small and barely developed. The sky out there looked wide and vast, yet they could not stay where they were. The space was growing tight. If they wanted to live, grow and flourish, they would need to leave their nest. One by one, they moved to the edge, fluttered their wings widely, and suddenly took off. Except the last bird. He moved to the edge, then moved back again. He moved to the edge, looked around, and then nervously backed away. He appeared to look down to the sides, up into the air, and then decided taking that risk was a bad idea. On this went for about a day. Then Mama Bird came back. And you can guess what happened. She pushed that baby right out of that nest. He may have been panicking. I'd guess he was. His wings fluttered sporadically and frantically, but as he flapped for his life, to his surprise, up he flew and landed on the branch of the nearest tree, where he seemed to sit stunned for a brief moment. Then, discovering he could fly, off he went, stopping briefly at each telephone pole, until at last away he went. If only humans were that simple, or that brave, right? We humans are complicated. Of course, we don't really know what went on inside the brain of that little bird, but we do know what goes on inside of ours when we are faced with doing something we've never done before or daring a risk we are not prepared to take. Some of us may be daring sorts who simply go off and do that thing. But if you are like the most of us, it is not that easy. And in fact, the older we get, the harder it gets. This is where our modern generation can teach us a thing or two about life and risk. It seems inhibition grows with age. The older we get, the more we seem to unlearn how to take risks. the more educated we get, the more reasons we can find to avoid risks. And most of all, the more experiences we have had in life that have hurt us, changed us, or impacted us, the more we cling to our own version of a nest for fear of taking that chance once again. We humans are complicated creatures. First of all, we can get stuck. I call it getting stuck. Getting stuck is that psychological, mental, or spiritual place within you that declares that it's safer to stay exactly where you are. We can get stuck in jobs that no longer nourish us, in relationships that no longer honor us, in habits that no longer help us, or in places that no longer sustain us. Getting stuck for us is complicated. Some of us get stuck due to some form of grief, trauma, or fear-inducing experience. Some of us can get stuck because we lack self-confidence, self-motivation, or the big one, self-compassion. In our scripture for today, we see Mark giving us two important stories about faith and risk back to back. In the first story, Jesus had just been in his home synagogue surrounded by jealous, taunting community members and relatives, jeering at him, taking offense at his ministry. And the scriptures tell us he could do no deed of power there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and cured them. He was amazed at their unbelief. Right after that, we learn that he continued to go among the villages of Galilee teaching. And then he called his inner circle, the 12, and gave them authority as well to heal and cleanse. He told them to take nothing for their journey except a staff. Now listen to this. No bread, no bag, no money, no extra clothing, just a staff. If a place welcomed them, they should preach and heal. If they did not, they should just shake the dust off their feet and move on. With that, they began to preach and heal. Friends, if Jesus felt stuck and paralyzed and could not be himself and carry out his ministry effectively among those who had no confidence or faith in him, why are you so hard on yourselves? Even Jesus had bad days, stuck days. In his ministry, even Jesus could not reach everybody. But Jesus is our North Star. For Christians, Jesus is our North Star. Just as God was always there for the Jewish people, leading the way through deserts and across rivers, so too is Jesus with every disciple who goes out into the world to proclaim God's coming kingdom. Every disciple is both follower and proclaimer. Turn this way is the cry of the prophets. You are turning the wrong way. You are going down the wrong path. You are headed in a direction that will take you into peril. Follow me. I will lead you homeward. This is the mission of a dedicated disciple. We lead homeward to God those who are lost in space. Being a disciple of Jesus is like promising to be a kind of compass to those who can no longer find their way. It's opening the eyes of the blind and unplugging the ears of the deaf. Following Jesus means you also have a prophetic mission. Go, Jesus says, go into an unknown world, into unknown places, find those who are lost and bring them home to God. Finally, we have to keep on swimming. One of the earliest metaphors of the church is the boat. And when you see that metaphor on the early church, you never see it docked at harbor, but always out tossing on the open seas. That's because the most dangerous place to be for a ship during a violent storm is in the harbor, where it will surely be smashed to pieces on the rocky shores. The place for a ship in a storm is on the seas, where it can ride the waves. Risky, sure, but not as destructive as tying it to the moor. Have any of you seen the movie Finding Dory? Well, in that movie, Dory, a blue fish, has a lot of trouble remembering things. But she eventually finds her way home because she just keeps on swimming, just keeps on going no matter what happens. She always finds a way to do what needs to be done and say what needs to be said. As disciples of Jesus, we need to keep on swimming. It's rough out there. Jesus doesn't promise us an easy road as a prophet for his kingdom or a bearer of the gospel. Jesus doesn't imagine that everyone will listen or that everyone will even be nice. But Jesus does promise us that the end of your journey will always end up in God's kingdom along with all those we have saved along the way. And what a grand feast that will be. May Jesus Christ be praised.